My grandfather hugged me at the front door of his house in Sewickley Heights at 6:38 on the evening of October 11th, 2025. He smelled like aftershave and pipe tobacco. His arms were thinner than they had been the year before. He was 81 years old. He had thrown a birthday party for himself in his own house because, he said, he was tired of waiting for his children to do it. He held me for 9 seconds. He patted my back twice. He stepped back. He looked at me from arm's length the way old men look at grandsons. He said, "Holden, grandson, hope you're enjoying your $8,000 a month allowance. Your grandmother would have wanted to see you living a little better than this. You look exhausted, son. Have you thought about that vacation we talked about?" I stood in the doorway, in the work shirt I had not had time to change out of, my hair still flat from the warehouse helmet, my shoes still smelling faintly of cardboard, and I said the 4 words that took me 6 years too long to say. I said, "Grandpa, what allowance?" The room behind him went still. I did not see it go still because I was looking at him, but I felt it. The way a room feels still when 12 people who have been talking and laughing all suddenly stop, all at once, all for different reasons that are about to become the same reason. My grandfather's face changed. It changed the way I had seen it change exactly once in my life, at my mother's funeral on a Wednesday morning in November of 2019, when the priest had said her name aloud for the first time during the service. He said very quietly, "Holden, the $8,000 a month for 6 years. Have you not been... Son, have you not been receiving it?" I said, "Grandpa, I haven't seen a single cent. I'm working 3 jobs. My name is Holden Ainsworth. I am 28 years old. I live in Lawrenceville in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I work 3 jobs. In the morning, from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m., I work at an Amazon fulfillment center off the Parkway. I move boxes. I scan barcodes. The shift pays $19 an hour. I have been there for 4 years. In the evenings, from 5 to 10, I drive Uber. The car is a 2011 Honda Civic with 198,000 miles on it. The check engine light has been on since 2022. I keep duct tape in the glove compartment. On weekends, Saturday and Sunday nights, I bartend at a place called O'Hara's on Butler Street, 3 blocks from my apartment. The bar pays me $40 a shift plus tips. The tips are good. The regulars have known me for 3 years. There is a man named Earl who comes in every Friday and orders a shot of Jameson and a Yuengling and asks about my mother every single time, even though my mother has been dead for 6 years, and I have told him this every single time. Earl is 72. Earl forgets things. I do not mind telling him about my mother once a week. I tell you these things because they are going to matter. I have been working 3 jobs since November of 2019, when my mother Lorraine Ainsworth died of stage 4 ovarian cancer at the age of 51, leaving behind $87,000 in unpaid medical bills that my family had collectively assumed, but that I, 22 years old at the time, refused to allow anyone else to pay. I was paying off the last $24,000 of those bills the night I drove to my grandfather's house for his 81st birthday party. I did not know that my grandfather had set up an allowance for me in December of 2019, 3 weeks after my mother's funeral. That would have paid off those bills in 12 months and given me a savings cushion of $400,000 by the time I turned 30. I did not know because I had never received a single dollar of it. I am going to tell you who took it. I am going to tell you what my grandfather did at 4:15 p.m. the next afternoon, after he and I sat in the office of a branch manager named Sairsa Donnelly at the First Pittsburgh National Bank on Smithfield Street downtown, while a fraud investigator named Jasper Mercier Reyes opened his laptop and showed us a screen that took the air out of 2 rooms. First, the room we were sitting in, and then, an hour later, the room I had grown up in at my grandfather's house in Sewickley Heights. I am going to tell you what was in the second account my grandfather had, set up under my name in 2019, an account he had not remembered until the bank found it, an account no one in my family had known existed, an account that as of 4:15 p.m. that afternoon contained $312,000 in my name. I am going to tell you about my stepmother Vesper, who married my father 14 months after my mother was buried. I am going to tell you about my sister Isadora, who was 32 years old and lived in a $1.2 million house in Fox Chapel, and had a son in private school and a daughter in private school, and a husband who was a corporate lawyer, and a kitchen with a sub-zero refrigerator and a reason, every single month for 6 years, to deposit $8,000 of her brother's money into her own account. I am going to tell you about my father Garrett, who knew, who let it happen, who looked at his shoes when his father asked him, in front of all of us, on the evening of October 11th, why he had let his only son work 3 jobs while his daughter took her brother's allowance. I am going to tell you about my grandfather, Theodore Ainsworth, who was 81 years old and worked at J&L Steel in Aliquippa from 1962 to 1995, and who, on the evening of October 11th, after the bank had closed and the lights in his dining room had been turned all the way up so he could see his family's faces clearly, said exactly 5 sentences to my stepmother Vesper that ended her marriage to my father. I am going to tell you what was on a piece of paper Jasper Mercier Reyes pulled out of a manila folder at 4:15 p.m. that afternoon, a piece of paper that, until that moment, my grandfather had forgotten he had ever signed. The night of the dinner. I had been at the Amazon warehouse since 5 that morning. I had driven Uber from 5 to 9 p.m. I had finished my last fare in Squirrel Hill at 9:10. I had driven home, showered for 4 minutes, and gone to my grandfather's house in the work clothes I would have changed out of if I had not lost track of time on a fare to Monroeville. My grandfather lived on Blackburn Road in Sewickley Heights, in a stone house he had bought in 1989 for $340,000, and that was now worth, according to his accountant, a number he refused to tell me. The house had a circular driveway and white columns. My grandmother Pearl had hated the columns. She had been making my grandfather remove them for 30 years. He had been promising her he would. He had never gotten around to it. She had died of complications from Parkinson's in March of 2020. The columns were still there. I parked behind my sister's BMW. I rang the doorbell. My grandfather opened the door himself. He was wearing a navy blazer, a white shirt with a button-down collar, and the gold pocket watch his father had given him on his 18th birthday. He had 3 white hairs on his eyebrows that he refused to let his barber trim. He always said his eyebrows were a man's last defense against looking like a banker. He smelled like aftershave and pipe tobacco. His arms were thinner than they had been the year before. He hugged me. He said the sentence about the allowance. I said the 4 words back. The room went still. There were 11 people in the dining room behind my grandfather. I will tell you what each of them did in the 7 seconds after I said Grandpa. What allowance? My father, Garrett, 58 years old, was sitting at the long oak dining table to my grandfather's right. He had a glass of Cabernet in front of him. He had been laughing at something my brother-in-law Cooper had just said. He stopped laughing, he put the glass down, he looked at the tablecloth. His face did not move. His face had been trained by my stepmother over 4 years not to move when something was about to go wrong. He was staring at a small grease stain on the tablecloth that my grandmother would have noticed and replaced before company arrived. My stepmother Vesper, 49 years old, was sitting next to him. She was wearing a black dress and the diamond earrings my mother had been buried in. Earrings my father had given her after my mother's funeral. In a moment, I will spend the rest of my life trying not to think about. She had been holding a glass of red wine. She heard me say, "What allowance?" The glass slipped out of her fingers. It did not break. It hit the tablecloth on its side. The wine spread across the linen in the shape of an open hand. She did not pick it up. My sister Isadora, 32 years old, was standing by the fireplace with my brother-in-law, Cooper. She had been telling my Aunt Margot a story about her son's hockey team. Her face went white in a way I had only ever seen on a face one other time, which was the face of my mother Lorraine in May of 2019, when the oncologist told her the immunotherapy had not worked. Isadora put down her wine glass on the mantelpiece. The glass made a small click against the marble. She did not finish her sentence to Aunt Margot. Aunt Margot did not realize the sentence had been abandoned. Aunt Margot is 63 and partially deaf. Aunt Margot just kept smiling. My brother-in-law, Cooper Sutton, the corporate lawyer, the man who had signed every private school tuition check for the last 6 years using money that did not belong to his wife, looked at the floor. Cooper has a tell. When Cooper is lying or being caught in something, he rubs his right earlobe with the index finger of his right hand. He was rubbing his right earlobe with the index finger of his right hand. My nephew Bram, 7 years old, was running a Hot Wheels Mustang along the edge of the windowsill. He did not notice anything. He was making engine noises, vroom, vroom. My niece Persimmon, 4 years old, was eating an olive off a toothpick. She did not notice anything either. She was 4. My Aunt Margot, my father's older sister, was the only adult in the room besides my grandfather, who had not married into the family. She was my grandfather's daughter. She was the only person in the room who, when she saw my grandfather's face change, took one step closer to him without saying anything. Aunt Margot had known something was wrong about Vesper for 4 years. She had told my grandfather. He had asked her not to interfere. She was the only person in the room who, in that moment, was not surprised by anything. My grandfather's housekeeper Esme had been carrying a tray of canapés out of the kitchen. She froze in the doorway. She had worked for my grandfather for 31 years. She had served my mother her last dinner at this house in October of 2019, 8 days before my mother went into hospice. She had been at my mother's funeral. She had not liked Vesper from the first time Vesper had walked into the house. She set the tray down on the sideboard without finishing crossing the room. She turned around. She walked back into the kitchen. I knew, the moment Esme walked back into the kitchen, that whatever was about to happen at this dinner, Esme already knew. The 2 final people in the room were my grandfather and me. My grandfather was looking at me. I was looking at my grandfather. He was the first to speak. He turned around slowly. He looked at his son Garrett. He looked at Vesper. He looked at Isadora. He looked at Cooper. He said, "Holden, come into the study with me. Now. Garrett, Vesper, Isadora, Cooper, you 4 will stay here. Do not leave this house. Do not touch your phones. Margot, dear, can you sit with the children? We are going to handle a family matter. We will be back in 20 minutes. He took my arm. He walked me down the long hallway to the study at the back of the house, past the photograph of my grandmother in the hospital bed in 2020, past the Steelers throw blanket folded on the leather chair, past the rotary telephone he refused to let the children play with. He closed the door behind us. He sat down at his desk. He motioned for me to sit in the chair across from him. He took out a yellow legal pad and a big pen, the same kind he had been using since the 1970s. He said, "Holden, I'm going to ask you 4 questions. I need you to answer them honestly. I need you to understand that whatever the answer is, you are not in trouble. Whatever has happened, happened to you, not by you. Are you with me?" I said, "Yes, Grandpa." He said, "Question 1. In December of 2019, 3 weeks after your mother's funeral, you and I went to the First Pittsburgh National Bank on Smithfield Street. I had you open a checking account. I told you I was going to put $8,000 a month into that account so you could pay off your mother's medical bills and stop working 3 jobs. Do you remember that day?" I said, "I remember." He said, "Question 2. Have you ever, at any point in the past 6 years, logged into that account and seen money in it?" I said, "Grandpa, I have not logged into that account in 5 years. The first 3 months I checked, there was nothing in it. I assumed you had changed your mind. I did not want to ask you about it because Mom had just died and you were already so generous, and I did not want you to feel obligated to do something you might have decided against. I let it go. I have not thought about it in years." He stopped writing. He set the pen down on the legal pad. He said, "Holden, I have been transferring $8,000 a month into that account every month since January of 2020. $560,000 total over 6 years. My accountant, Marjorie, has been verifying the $8,000 transfers from my trust account every quarter. The money has been leaving my trust on the first business day of every month for 6 years." He paused. He said, "Question 3. Are you absolutely certain you have not been receiving this money?" I said, "Grandpa, I drive Uber. I bartend on weekends. I have been at the Amazon warehouse since 6 a.m. most mornings for 4 years. If I had been getting $8,000 a month, I would not be doing any of those things." I would have paid off Mom's debt by 2021. I would be saving for a house. I would be living, Grandpa. I have not been living. I have been surviving. His eyes filled. I had not seen my grandfather cry since my grandmother's funeral. He did not cry now. He just let his eyes fill. Then he blinked twice, and his eyes were dry again, and his face was the face of an 81-year-old man who had run a steel mill division of 300 men for 23 years, and who had not gotten where he was by letting tears stay in his eyes. He said, "Question 4, the last question. Holden, look at me. Do you know who took this money?" I thought about the room behind us. I thought about my stepmother dropping her wine glass. I thought about my sister's face going white. I thought about my brother-in-law rubbing his earlobe. I said, "I have a guess, Grandpa. I do not have proof." He said, "We are going to get you the proof tomorrow morning. You and I are going to the bank at 9 a.m. We are going to spend whatever time it takes to find out where my money has been going. Whoever took it is going to give it back. I do not yet know what else is going to happen. I want you to go home tonight and get some sleep. You have not slept enough in 6 years. Tomorrow you and I are going to fix that." He stood up. He said, "Holden, I am sorry. I am sorry I did not check. I am sorry I assumed. I am the one who set this up. I am the one who left the door unlocked. Whatever happened to you for the last 6 years happened because I did not pay attention to a system I had built. I am going to pay attention now. Do you forgive me?" I said, "Grandpa, there's nothing to forgive." He said, "There is. You will see in time. Forgive me anyway." I said, "I forgive you." He hugged me. He held me for 31 seconds. He let go. He said, "Now go home. I will see you at the bank at 9 a.m. Wear something other than your work shirt. We are going to be sitting in a manager's office for several hours. The manager is named Saoirse Donnelly. I have known her father since 1981. She will treat us well." I went home. I did not sleep. The First Pittsburgh National Bank on Smithfield Street is a 6-story limestone building with revolving brass doors that have been there since 1923. My grandfather had been a customer of the bank since he opened his first checking account in 1962 with a $42 deposit from his first paycheck at J&L Steel. The bank had loaned him the money for his first house in 1968. The bank had managed his trust since 1991. Saoirse Donnelly met us in the lobby at 5 minutes to 9. She was 47 years old. She had reddish-brown hair pulled back into a low ponytail. She was wearing a charcoal pantsuit and a single gold cross around her neck. She had small reading glasses on a chain. Her father had grown up 2 streets from my grandfather in Aliquippa. She said, "Mr. Ainsworth, Holden, come on up. We have the small conference room reserved for the day. We have coffee. Whatever this is, we are going to get to the bottom of it. I have already pulled both accounts and asked Jasper Mercier-Reyes from the fraud unit to be available." We rode the elevator to the 4th floor. We sat down at a small round table in a windowless room. Saoirse opened her laptop. She said, "Mr. Ainsworth, walk me through what you believe should be in Holden's account." My grandfather walked her through it. December 2019, $8,000 per month. Direct deposit, transferred from his trust account on the first business day of each month. Standing instruction. He had verified the outgoing transfers every quarter for 6 years. Saoirse typed for 2 minutes. She turned the laptop around. She showed us Holden's checking account. The screen showed 70 deposits of $8,000 each on the first business day of every month from January 2020 through October 2025. It also showed 70 withdrawals of $8,000 each on the same day. Saoirse said, "Each deposit was followed within 4 hours by an automated transfer to a second account." "Let me pull up the second account," she typed. She turned the screen. The second account belonged to Isadora Ainsworth Sutton. The transfers had been going to her account since January 2020. She had withdrawn the funds on average within 48 hours of receipt. Total transferred to her account over 6 years, $560,000. My grandfather did not move. I did not move. Saoirse said, "There is an authorization document on file. It is from January 7th, 2020. The document authorizes the standing transfer from Holden's checking to a designated account in the name of Isadora Ainsworth Sutton. The document is signed by Holden Ainsworth. I said, Saoirse, I did not sign that document. She said, I know. Let me show you why I know. She opened a second window. She pulled up a scan of my driver's license signature from when I had opened the account in 2019. She pulled up the signature on the authorization. She pulled up a third document, a signature from a checking account that had been opened in December 2019 by Vesper Hartman before she became Vesper Ainsworth at this same branch. The signature on the authorization matched Vesper's signature, not mine. Saoirse said, I am going to ask Jasper to come in now. He is going to spend the rest of the morning verifying everything. We are going to need until early afternoon to confirm the full picture. Mr. Ainsworth, would you and Holden like to wait in the conference room, or would you prefer to come back at, say, 4 p.m.? My grandfather said, We will wait. Saoirse said, I will have lunch brought up at noon. We waited. For 5 hours and 40 minutes, we sat in a windowless conference room on the 4th floor of the First Pittsburgh National Bank, while Jasper Mercier Reyes worked in a different room down the hall, pulling records, comparing signatures, calling the retired branch manager who had been at the bank in January 2020, calling Vesper's other bank for a signature comparison. My grandfather did not say much during those hours. He sat in his chair. He looked at his hands. He looked at the wall. He drank 3 cups of coffee. He ate half of a turkey sandwich at 1 p.m. He did not finish it. Around 2 p.m., he said, Holden, I want to tell you something. Your grandmother liked Vesper for the first 6 months. Your father had been so lonely after your mother died. Vesper had been your mother's friend. She had cried at your mother's funeral. She had brought us casseroles. She had been kind to your grandmother during the Parkinsons. I had liked her too. I had thought she was a comfort to your father. Then, around June of 2020, your grandmother told me she had changed her mind. Your grandmother said Vesper had asked her about the trust 3 times during one visit. 3 times. About different aspects of it. Your grandmother told me she did not trust the questions. I told your grandmother she was being paranoid. I was wrong, Holden. I should have listened. Your grandmother knew. Your grandmother always knew. I said, Grandpa, you did not know. He said, I should have known. I had her sign a prenuptial agreement before she married your father. I made it strong. I made it strong because somewhere, in the back of my mind, your grandmother's voice was telling me to. I never thought she would steal from you, Holden. I thought she might try to influence your father's choices. I did not think she would forge your name on a bank document. I said, Grandpa, stop. You did not know. None of us did. He said, Your sister knew. I said, I know. We did not say anything else for a while. At 3:45 p.m., Saoirse came back into the conference room. She said, Mr. Ainsworth, Holden, Jasper has finished his preliminary report. He is going to come in at 4:15. I want to give you a heads up that there is one additional item that came up in the search of your name in our system, Holden. It is something Jasper found that he wants to discuss with you and Mr. Ainsworth together. He says it is good news. He wants you to be sitting down for it. I said, Good news? She said, He'll explain, 4:15. She left. My grandfather looked at me. He said, Holden, I do not know what he is going to tell us. I want to apologize in advance for whatever it is. If it is something I forgot about, I am sorry. I said, Grandpa, it's okay. He said, It is not okay, not yet. At 4:15 p.m., Jasper Mercier Reyes walked into the conference room. He was a tall man, about 50, with silver-rimmed glasses and a soft voice. He was carrying a laptop and a manila folder. He sat down. He opened the folder. He said, Mr. Ainsworth, I have completed my preliminary investigation. I am going to summarize my findings and then we will discuss next steps. The findings are these. 1. The authorization document on file in Holden's account is a forgery. The signature does not match Holden's signature. It matches Vesper Hartman's signature, which is on file at this branch in connection with an account she opened in December of 2019. 2. The signature comparison has been independently verified by our forensic document examiner this morning. 3. $560,000 has been redirected from Holden's checking account to Isadora Ainsworth Sutton's checking account at this same bank over a period of 70 months. 4. The redirect was set up under the forged authorization. 5. The conduct, on its face, constitutes wire fraud, forgery, and theft under Pennsylvania law. The bank will be making a referral to the Pittsburgh Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit and to the FBI Pittsburgh Field Office, as required by federal banking regulation. That referral will go out tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. unless you, Mr. Ainsworth, and you, Holden, instruct us otherwise as the parties affected. We will hold the referral pending your instruction. My grandfather said, "Hold the referral. Do not send it tomorrow morning. Wait until I tell you to send it. I want to handle the family side first." Jasper said, "Understood, sir. We will hold." He paused. He said, "There is one additional item." He opened the manila folder. He took out a single piece of paper. He turned it around. He slid it across the table. He said, "Mr. Ainsworth, Holden. While I was running Holden's name through our system this morning to confirm there were no other accounts associated with the fraud, I came across a second account in Holden's name, a savings account. Opened on December 18, 2019, 2 days after the checking account. Funded with an initial deposit of $4,000. Mr. Ainsworth, you are listed on the account as the funding source and as a cosigner. Holden, you are listed as the account holder." He paused. He said, "Mr. Ainsworth, sir, do you remember opening this account?" My grandfather looked at the paper. He looked at the paper for a long moment. He looked at the paper for what I will tell you, when I tell this story to my children someday, was the longest moment of my grandfather's life. He said, very slowly, Yes, I do. I had forgotten. Pearl and I had agreed. We were going to surprise the boy on his 30th birthday. Pearl picked the amount, $4,000 a month. She wanted him to have something that was just his. She wanted him to have a cushion. Pearl had wanted to do this for him without telling him. She had said, "Theo, the boy is going to know we love him through what we do, not what we say." She had said that. I had set it up. I had set the standing instruction. I had funded it from my personal checking account, not the trust, so Marjorie never tracked it. He stopped. He was crying now, not loudly, just tears. They were rolling down his face onto his white shirt and onto the table in front of him. Jasper Mercier Reyes said gently, "Mr. Ainsworth, the standing instruction has been running every month for 70 months, $4,000 per month. The savings account currently contains, as of this morning's open of business, $312,492.16, with accumulated interest. The account has not been touched since the day it was opened. The funds are intact. Mr. Ainsworth, sir, you forgot to tell anyone about this account, including Holden, including, presumably, anyone who would have intercepted it." I looked at my grandfather. My grandfather looked at me. I said, "Grandpa." He said, "Holden, I am so sorry, I forgot. After Pearl died, I said, 'Grandpa, stop, look at me.' He looked at me. I said, 'Grandpa, Grandma left me $312,000. He said, yes, son." I said, "Grandma." He said, "Yes." I started to cry. I had not cried since November 16, 2019, the morning after my mother's funeral. I cried in the conference room of the First Pittsburgh National Bank for approximately 7 minutes. My grandfather sat across from me and did not say anything. He waited. When I stopped, he said, "Holden, your grandmother loved you. She wanted me to tell you. She made me promise I would. I forgot the promise. The bank just kept the promise for me." We left the bank at 5:20 p.m. We drove back to Sewickley Heights in my grandfather's 2003 Lincoln Town car. He drove. He had been driving the same car for 22 years. He had refused to upgrade. He had refused to get an automatic. He shifted the column-mounted gear stick the way he had been shifting it since the 70s. Halfway home, in the silence of the car, he said, "Holden, tonight is going to be hard. I want you to let me handle it. You do not need to say anything. You can speak if you want to, but you do not have to. Do you understand? I said, Yes, Grandpa. He said, I'm going to ask Vesper to leave my house tonight. I am going to ask your father to support that decision. If your father does not support it, I will have to make a decision about your father that will be harder for me than anything I have done in 81 years. I do not yet know what your father is going to choose. I said, Grandpa, he will choose her. He said, We will see. I said, He chose her at Mom's funeral, Grandpa. He chose her 14 months later when he married her. He has been choosing her for 6 years. He will choose her tonight. My grandfather did not respond for a long time. Then he said, Holden, even if he does, he is still my son. I said, I know, Grandpa. He said, I am sorry. I said, Don't be. We pulled into the circular driveway at 6:20 p.m. Esme, the housekeeper, opened the door before we had reached the porch. She said, Mr. Ainsworth, they are all in the dining room. They have been there since you left. None of them have been on their phones. I took the phones an hour ago. I told them you had asked. I am sorry. Was that too much? My grandfather kissed her on the forehead. He said, Esme, you have been the only person in this house with sense for 31 years. You did exactly the right thing. Thank you. He walked into the dining room. I followed him. There were 4 people at the table. My father Garrett, my stepmother Vesper, my sister Isadora, my brother-in-law Cooper. They had been sitting at the table for 9 hours. Esme had given them water. Esme had given them sandwiches at 1 p.m. Esme had taken their phones at 3 p.m. when she had texted my grandfather to ask permission, and he had said yes. They looked the way people look after 9 hours of waiting for something they know is going to happen. My grandfather sat down at the head of the table. I sat down next to him. He did not invite the others to speak. He spoke first. He said, I went to the bank this morning with Holden. We spent 6 hours there. Sayers Donnelly and Jasper Mercier Reyes verified the following facts. Vesper. In January of 2020, 6 weeks after I set up an allowance for Holden of $8,000 per month, you walked into the First Pittsburgh National Bank with a forged authorization document signed in Holden's name. The signature was yours. The authorization redirected the $8,000 per month into Isadora's checking account. Over 6 years, you have stolen $560,000 from my grandson. Cooper, you used those funds to pay private school tuition for your 2 children. Isadora, you used those funds to buy a Range Rover, finance the addition on your house, and take your family to Maui in 2023. Garrett, you knew. You knew from approximately April of 2020. You knew because Vesper told you. You did not stop it. You did not tell me. You did not tell Holden. You let your son work 3 jobs while your wife took your son's allowance for your daughter. He paused. The room was silent. Vesper said, Theodore. My grandfather said, Vesper, I am going to speak to you in a moment. Do not interrupt. She closed her mouth. He said, I have asked the bank to hold the criminal referral until I instruct them to send it. The referral will be made to both the Pittsburgh Police Department and the FBI Pittsburgh Field Office. It will be made unless I instruct otherwise by Monday morning. He turned to my sister. He said, Isadora, you are going to pay Holden back $560,000. You will pay it back from your own assets. You will sell the Range Rover. You will sell the house in Fox Chapel. You will pay Holden $5,000 per month on the first business day of every month for 112 months. The first payment is due November 1st. If you complete the repayment in full and on time, I will instruct the bank not to send the criminal referral. If you miss any payment by more than 30 days, the bank will send the referral the following morning. Do you understand? Isadora was crying. She said, Grandpa, Daddy, Vesper. She stopped. She said, Grandpa, I understand. I will pay it back. I will sell the house. I am sorry. I am so sorry, Holden. I am so sorry. My grandfather said, Cooper, you will sign the repayment agreement as a co-signer. If Isadora misses a payment, you will be jointly liable. If you refuse to sign, the criminal referral will go forward Monday morning regardless of whether Isadora repays. Do you understand? Cooper said, Yes, sir, I will sign. My grandfather turned to my father. He said, Garrett. My father did not look up. My grandfather said, "Garrett, look at me." My father looked up. My grandfather said, "Garrett, you are my only son. Your mother and I raised you. We loved you. We forgave you for many things. We forgave you for the second mortgage you took out on this house in 1998 without telling us. We forgave you for the affair we found out about in 2003. We forgave you for the way you spoke to your mother in the last year of her life when she was struggling with the Parkinson's. We forgave you because you were our son, and we believed every father has to forgive his son or there's no point in being a father. I am going to forgive you for this too, Garrett. But I am going to ask you something. I am going to ask you only once. Do you choose Holden, your son, your only son, the son of Lorraine, the boy who has worked 3 jobs for 6 years while your wife took his allowance, or do you choose Vesper, the woman you have been married to for 4.5 years, who forged a document, who stole from your son, who watched your son work 3 jobs, who never once said, "Garrett, we should give this money back to Holden"? Do you choose your son or your wife? Answer me, Garrett. My father looked at Vesper. Vesper looked at my father with her chin lifted, her face composed, her eyes the eyes of a woman who has been preparing for this question for 6 years and who has rehearsed the answer she expects to get. My father looked at me. I looked at my father. My father said, "Dad, I—" He stopped. He started again. He said, "Dad, I choose Holden." Vesper said, "Garrett." My father said, "Vesper, I want you to leave my father's house tonight. I want you to be out of my house by tomorrow afternoon. I will be filing for divorce on Monday." Vesper stood up. She slapped him. The sound was very loud. She said, "Garrett, you are going to regret this for the rest of your life." My father said, "Vesper, I have been regretting it for 6 years. Tonight is the only night in 6 years I will not be regretting something." Vesper looked at my grandfather. My grandfather said his 5 sentences. He said, "Vesper, I have known you for 6 years. My wife knew you for 1. You convinced my son to remarry you 14 months after Lorraine was buried. You forged my grandson's signature 6 weeks after I set up that allowance. You are not part of this family. You never were. Pack your things, tonight." Vesper opened her mouth. She closed it. She turned around. She walked out of the dining room, down the hallway, out the front door. We heard the front door close. We heard her car start in the driveway. We heard her drive away. The 5 of us, my grandfather, my father, my sister, Cooper, and I, sat at the table in silence for what felt like a very long time. Then Esme came in with a tray of coffee. She set it down on the table. She said, "Mr. Ainsworth, the children are asleep upstairs in the guest room. I gave them dinner. Persimmon asked when her mommy and daddy were leaving. I told her you would come up to say good night when you were ready." My grandfather said, "Thank you, Esme." Esme said, "You're welcome, Mr. Ainsworth." She left. My grandfather poured 5 cups of coffee. He passed them around. He said, "We are going to drink this coffee. Then Garrett is going to take Isadora and Cooper home. The children will stay here tonight. Tomorrow we will work out the details of what happens next. None of us is going to bed angry. We are not going to bed forgiven either. We are going to bed, and tomorrow we will wake up, and we will start the work of figuring out who we are now." He raised his cup. He said, "To Lorraine, to Pearl, the 2 women who loved this family more than this family deserved. May they forgive us for the years we wasted. May they help us not waste any more." We drank. Nobody else said anything. That was 8 months ago. I'm going to tell you briefly what has happened since. I quit Amazon 2 weeks after the bank meeting. I quit Uber 4 weeks after that. I kept the bartending job at O'Hara's because I like it, and because Earl asked me not to leave. Earl is now 73. He still asks me about my mother every Friday. I still tell him. I paid off the last $24,000 of my mother's medical debt on November 3rd, 2025. 8 days after the bank meeting. I paid it from the savings account my grandmother had opened for me. The hospital sent me a paid-in-full letter on November 12, 2025, exactly 6 years, and 1 day after my mother's funeral. I bought a small house in Lawrenceville on Hatfield Street in February. 2 bedrooms, brick, a small porch, a backyard with a maple tree. The previous owner was an 86-year-old widow named Mrs. Halloran, whose husband had built the house himself in 1958. She wanted someone who would take care of it. She gave me a discount. She comes by twice a month for tea. I went to Ireland in March. I had not taken a vacation since 2017. I went for 3 weeks. I visited the village in County Cork that my mother had wanted to see, Skibbereen, where her grandmother had been born. I stood in the cemetery where her great-grandparents were buried. I left a photograph of my mother on the headstone of a woman named Bridget Ainsworth, my great-great-grandmother, who had crossed the ocean in 1898 with $16 and a dream of Pittsburgh. I cried in that cemetery the way you cry when you know nobody is watching, and the only people who ever did watch you have been gone a long time. Isadora has made every payment on time since November. She paid her first payment the morning of November 1st, 2025, in cash at the bank, in front of Saoirse Donnelly. She has been $5,000 per month exactly on the first business day of every month for 8 months now. She and Cooper sold the Fox Chapel house in February. They moved to Greenfield. The kids are in public school. Bram is doing fine. Persimmon misses her old room. Isadora has not asked me for anything. She has not asked me to forgive her. I have not offered. We are not ready. Both of us know it. Neither of us is in a hurry. What Isadora does not know, what she will not know for many years, if ever, is that every $5,000 I receive from her goes into a trust fund I have set up in the name of her 2 children to be released to them when they each turn 25. The trust fund grows at $5,000 a month. By the time Bram turns 25, the trust will hold approximately $300,000 for him. By the time Persimmon turns 25, hers will hold a similar amount. They did not steal from me. They did not even know. They will not be punished for what their mother did. My grandfather did the same thing for me through my grandmother. I am doing the same thing for them through their grandfather. Vesper moved to Naples, Florida in December. She tried to call my father twice in the first month. My father did not answer. She has not called since. The divorce was finalized in April. Vesper got nothing. The prenuptial agreement my grandfather had insisted on was, as he put it, the strongest prenup my lawyer had ever written. She walked away with her car, her clothes, and the value of half a checking account that contained $1,100. My father and I have lunch every other Sunday at a diner in Bloomfield called Pamela's. We eat pancakes. We talk about the Steelers. We do not talk about Vesper. We do not talk about the bank. We sometimes talk about my mother. He tells me stories I did not know. He told me in March that my mother had said the morning before she died that she was worried about me, that she was worried I would carry the medical debt alone, that I would refuse help, that I would punish myself for her pride. She had asked him to make sure I did not. He had nodded. He had not done it. He told me this in tears on a Sunday morning at Pamela's over a stack of buttermilk pancakes. I told him, "Dad, I forgive you, not for everything, but for this." He cried for 10 minutes. I drove him home. We did not talk about it again. My grandfather is 82 now. He turned 82 in March. We had a small dinner, just him and me and Esme. He does not throw birthday parties anymore. He says he has had enough of family dinners. 2 weeks after the dinner in October, my grandfather started doing something I did not expect. He started coming to O'Hara's. The first night was a Friday in late October. I was bartending. I looked up at 9 p.m. and there he was, walking through the front door in his Steelers jacket. He had driven himself. He had never been to O'Hara's before. He had never been to Lawrenceville before, as far as I knew. He sat down at the corner stool. He said, "Holden, I wanted to see where my grandson works. I wanted to see what you have been building. I never came before because I thought you'd think I was checking up on you. I should have come years ago." I poured him a Manhattan. Maker's Mark, sweet vermouth, 2 dashes of Angostura, a brandied cherry from the jar Earl had brought me from a place in Strip District. I shook it the way my grandfather had taught me to shake one when I was 16 years old, and he had let me make him a drink at his house for the first time. I slid it across the bar. He raised the glass. He said, "To your mother, Lorraine Ainsworth, who would have been proud of the man you became. even working 3 jobs you did not need to be working, even more so for working them anyway. I raised my own glass, a small pour of Jameson I had ready in honor of Earl, who had not yet arrived. I said, to Mom. We drank. My grandfather stayed for 2 hours. He talked to the regulars. Earl came in at 10 and sat down next to him. Earl told my grandfather about his late wife Beulah for 40 minutes. My grandfather listened to every word. My grandfather told Earl about my grandmother Pearl. They were both quiet for a long time after that. They drank their drinks. They watched the Steelers game on the TV behind the bar. The Steelers lost. Earl said figures. My grandfather laughed for the first time I had heard him laugh since my grandmother died. He left at 11:30. He did not say goodbye in the doorway. He just nodded to me behind the bar. I nodded back. 2 weeks later, he came back. 2 weeks after that, he came back again. By December, he was a regular. By February, he had a stool, the corner stool. Earl had moved 1 stool down to make room for him. Earl had said it was the right thing to do. My grandfather had thanked him. By April, my grandfather was at O'Hara's every Friday night. He has not missed a Friday since. He is 82 years old. He drives himself across town every Friday from Sewickley Heights to Lawrenceville. He sits at the corner stool, he drinks 1 Manhattan, he talks to Earl, he watches the Steelers. He leaves at 11:30. He does not say goodbye, he just nods. I nod back. Last Friday, June 12, 2026, 8 months after the bank meeting, Earl was not at O'Hara's. Earl had died on Tuesday. Heart attack. He had been 73. My grandfather and I sat, in silence, at the bar for a while when I told him. He drank his Manhattan slowly. Then he said, "Holden, I want to ask you something." I said, "Yes, Grandpa." He said, "When I die, and I am not in a hurry, but it will not be too many more years, would you put a small plaque on Earl's stool, not mine? Earl's. He kept that stool warm for me before I knew I needed a stool. He moved over to make room. He never asked me for anything. He was the kind of man your grandmother would have liked. I would like for the bar to remember him." I said, "Grandpa, of course." He said, "Thank you." He drank. He looked at the Steelers game. Then he said, without looking at me, "Holden, your mother would have liked it here. Did you know that? Your mother loved bars like this. She used to come here in college, before she met your father, before she became Lorraine Ainsworth and started living the life she thought she was supposed to live. She told me once. At the cabin in Ligonier in 2015, she said, "Theodore, the happiest I ever was at a place on Butler Street called O'Hara's when I was 19 years old, drinking Yuengling with a boy I never married." I had forgotten that, Holden. I had forgotten until I started coming here. I think she was telling me, that day at the cabin, where to find her after she was gone. I think she has been here the whole time, son. I could not speak. He said, "Pour me another, would you?" I poured him another. He raised the glass. He said, "To Lorraine, who came home before any of us did." I raised my glass. I said nothing. We drank. That is the story. That is what happened at the dinner on October 11th. That is what was in the second account. That is what my father chose. That is what Vesper got. That is what Isadora is repaying every month, on time, without complaint. That is what my grandfather built into a savings account for me in 2019, on my grandmother's instruction, before she died, before the world changed, before I knew that the money was supposed to be there, waiting for me the whole time. It was waiting for me the whole time. $312,000 in an account I never knew existed. 48 months of bills I could have stopped paying. 2,700 Uber rides I did not need to drive. 6 years of Earl asking me about my mother on Friday nights, while my grandmother, who had wanted me to know I was loved, kept depositing $4,000 a month into an account neither one of us was checking. She was telling me the whole time. She was telling me in the only way she knew how. She was telling me by what she did, not by what she said. That is the only way that money ever speaks. That is the only way that love ever speaks. You write down what you mean. You sign the document. You set the standing instruction. You let the bank keep the promise for you when you have forgotten. when you are gone, when the people who needed it never knew it was there. I did not know my grandmother was talking to me for 6 years. I know now. I am listening. I am going to spend the rest of my life listening. That is what I learned at 4:15 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon in October, in a windowless conference room on the 4th floor of the First Pittsburgh National Bank, when a man named Jasper Mercier Reyes slid a piece of paper across a table and showed an 81-year-old steelworker that the wife he had buried in 2020 had been keeping a promise to a grandson neither of them had remembered to tell. That is what the bank found under my name. That is what changed everything. Not the money. The promise behind the money. The grandmother behind the promise. The woman who had loved a boy she would never meet again, and who had set up a way to keep loving him after she was gone, and who had trusted a bank in downtown Pittsburgh to do it for her. The bank kept the promise. That is what banks do when they are good. That is what banks do when somebody has set them up right. That is what my grandmother had set up. That is what I will set up someday for someone I love who does not yet know I love them. I will write it down. I will sign the document. I will leave it behind. The bank will keep the promise. That is the lesson. That is the whole lesson.